All right, we're jumping right into a major developing story out of New Delhi. A massive explosion has shaken India's capital, and today we're going to break down everything we know so far.
Just think about that for a second. Ears went numb from 1 kilometer away. That's what an eyewitness said. So right off the bat, we know this wasn't just some loud bang. We're talking about a physical, concussive force that was felt over a massive area.
Okay, so let's get into the core facts. What exactly happened here? Let's piece together the timeline of this really chaotic event. So this all happened on Monday evening, and the location? It's right near the Red Fort metro station in Delhi. Now, for anyone who knows this city, that's a really busy area, a major landmark, a transit hub. The location alone just immediately raises the stakes here.
You can just imagine the scene. The first reports paint a picture of total chaos. It looks like the explosion started in just one car, but the power was, well, it was immense. It set off fires in other vehicles nearby, damaged local shops, and, like we said, the blast was felt a full kilometer away. Just incredible.
And it wasn't just the sound out on the street. Another witness said the noise was so loud that their windows were literally shaking. That just gives you a sense of the incredible energy that was unleashed in that moment. So let's talk about the immediate aftermath. You know, an explosion on this scale, it's always going to have a tragic human cost. And in those first few chaotic hours, the information coming out was, well, it was all over the place. And that's pretty typical, right? In the middle of all that chaos, rumors and unverified numbers just spread like wildfire. This was no different. That's why it's so important to separate what people were hearing at first from what's actually been confirmed. And this right here really shows you what that fog of war looks like in a breaking news situation. The initial reports, they were staggering. People were saying 30, maybe even 40 people had died. But once the emergency services managed to get a handle on things, the official confirmed number came down to at least 8 fatalities. And that's not all. On top of the fatalities, we now know that more than 24 people were injured, rushed to hospitals in the area. So even though the initial death toll was inflated, the human cost is still incredibly significant. Absolutely tragic. And let's move away from the numbers for a second and back to what people actually went through. This quote, wow, a sound like a tsunami. Think about that. Not a bang, not an explosion, but a tsunami of sound. It just perfectly captures that overwhelming, all-encompassing roar that would have created instant panic. All right, so as the initial shock starts to wear off, the big question shifts. It's no longer just what happened, but the one everyone wants an answer to. Why did it happen? And this is where the real investigation kicks in. And here it is, the question that's on everybody's mind. The one that's driving this whole investigation. Was this just some kind of freak accident? When you look at the sheer scale of this and the location, you have to wonder. And this really breaks down why that question is so urgent. Investigators are focusing on 3 key things. First, just the intensity of the blast. An explosion that makes your ears go numb a kilometer away, that points to something way more powerful than a simple car fire. Then you've got the location, right near the Red Fort, a historic, heavily secured area. That immediately raises red flags. And finally, you have to look at history. Sadly, Delhi has been a target for terror attacks before, like the awful bombings back in 2008. So, of course, authorities are on high alert. So, with all that in mind, the investigators are keeping every possibility open. They have to. They're looking at whether this was a deliberate act of terror, but they're also seriously considering if it could have been a terrible accident. Maybe something inside the car exploded or there was some kind of massive malfunction. Okay, so with all these questions swirling around, what happens next? Let's walk through the actual steps the authorities are taking right now to get some answers. Well, it's a very methodical process. First thing they did, step 1, was to completely seal off the entire area. You have to preserve the scene. Now, step 2, the forensic teams are on the ground, literally combing through all the debris, looking for any tiny clue, especially any sign of explosives. And at the same time, step 3, investigators are pulling every bit of CCTV footage from the area to try and piece together a timeline of exactly what went down. So here's the bottom line as of right now. We just don't know for sure. It's really important to stress that. While there's a ton of speculation, the actual cause of the blast is still officially unconfirmed. The investigation is very much active, and we're all just going to have to wait for the evidence to tell the real story. But something like this leaves behind more than just broken glass and twisted metal. It leaves a really tough question hanging in the air, one that goes way beyond just this one incident. It forces millions of people to ask themselves, how safe is our city, especially a city that's seen this kind of violence before? And that's the big question that authorities and everyone else are now left to grapple with.